Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've brought us, well, a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got articles, historical accounts, all challenging that sort of standard image we have of pirates, right? This skull and crossbones. So today we're taking a deep dive into the world of female pirates and maritime figures. It's surprisingly well documented in some ways, but also just constantly mythologized. We're looking at the 16th century up through the 19th.
Right, from Ireland to the China coast.
Exactly. And our mission really is to try and pull out the nuggets of truth. See what's hiding beneath all the layers of sensationalism that built up over the centuries.
Yeah, and it's important to set the stage, I think, because, look, when most people picture a pirate, it's Blackbeard, or Captain Kidd, these sort of swashbuckling men.
The default image, yeah.
But actually, some of the most infamous names, the ones that really lasted, they belong to women. Women who had to basically commit, well, absolute social and legal defiance just to get on a ship's deck.
Defiance is definitely the word. I mean, your sources are crystal clear on this. Historically, women were just flat out barred from almost every kind of ship. Merchant, military, privateer, you name it.
It wasn't just rules or tradition either.
No, it was deeper. Superstition, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Deep-seated, ancient superstition. Sailors fiercely believed women were bad luck, like their presence would anger the sea gods, bring on storms, disease, disaster.
Wow.
And beyond that, there was let's call it the practical fear, or maybe the patriarchal fear, that women on board would just cause chaos, distraction, fighting among the all-male crews, especially on long voyages, months, sometimes years at sea.
So, okay, let's say you're a woman back then, 17th, 18th century. You want a life at sea, maybe for independence, maybe for money, opportunities you couldn't get on land. You basically had only two paths, and both were incredibly dangerous.
That's right. Path one. Achieve such massive political or economic power that nobody could touch you. You were just too powerful to be stopped.
Like a queen or an admiral in her own right.
Exactly. Or path two. Adopt a disguise. A perfect, permanent, high-stakes male disguise. And hope nobody ever found out.
We're going to explore both those paths today, aren't we?
Yeah.
We'll look at these incredible leaders. Grace O'Malley, the Irish chief.
I know, defying Queen Elizabeth herself.
And Cheng Yi-sao, the Chinese admiral you mentioned. Her power was just staggering, dwarfed actual kings.
Absolutely. But we really have to spend a good chunk of time on the pair who basically defined female piracy for most people, the Caribbean duo and Bonny and Mary Read.
And right here. This is where we hit our biggest source problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to flag this right up front.
We do, because the overwhelming majority, I mean, almost everything we think we know about Bonny and Read, it comes from one specific book.
Captain Charles Johnson's General History of the Pirates, published 1724.
Precisely. And while it's considered the definitive history, well, it's less straight history and more like an 18th century true crime bestseller.
He was blending things.
Oh, absolutely. Brilliantly, you could argue. He took documented facts like stuff from the trial transcripts in Jamaica.
Okay, and wove them together with, frankly, sensational fiction. He knew exactly what his audience wanted. High seas drama, romance, betrayal. Even if he had to invent details or entire backstories to deliver it.
So filtering that sensationalism from the confirmed facts.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big part of this deep dive.
Constantly. We have to keep asking, does this come from the trial record?
Yeah.
Or does it just sound like a good story Johnson cooked up?
Okay, let's start right there then. With Johnson's General History, it came out super quickly after Bonny and Read were caught. Like 4 years later?
Barely 4 years, yeah, 1724. And it was a massive hit, a commercial sensation, which tells you Johnson had every reason to make their story as juicy, as detailed as possible.
Right. Dramatization was key.
Absolutely key. Think about it. If Johnson had just stuck to the bare facts from the court records, they were captured, convicted, pleaded pregnant, that whole chapter might have been, 2 pages long, max?
Oh, not much of a story there. Exactly. Johnson needed biographies, rich, character-driven stories. And it's telling that he only really did this deep dive into origins for a few select pirates. Bonny and Read being prime examples, he knew their gender was the big selling point.
So he basically had to invent their early lives, didn't he?
Pretty much. Fill in the gaps with plausible or sometimes not so plausible fiction. And that's really clear when you look at the story he tells about Mary Read's childhood. It's all about disguise, but driven by, well, money, necessity.
Okay, lay it out for us. How does Johnson explain Mary Read's start?
According to Johnson, Mary was illegitimate. Her mother had an affair after her husband, a sailor, went off to sea and was presumed lost or dead.
Standard enough start for a bit of scandal, I suppose.
Right. But then the twist comes. Mary's mother also had an older legitimate son with her deceased husband, and shortly after Mary was born, that older son died.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, here's the financial angle. The dead husband's mother, Mary's grandmother-in-law, was wealthy, and she'd been providing a weekly allowance, a crown a week, to support the legitimate grandson.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Exactly. If the grandmother-in-law found out the legitimate heir was dead and the only child left was illegitimate Mary, that crucial support would vanish. The mother and Mary would face, destitution.
So the mother makes a drastic choice.
A really drastic choice. She starts dressing baby Mary in boys' clothes, passing her off as the dead son.
To keep the money coming.
To keep the money coming. And this deception, according to Johnson, went on for years. It provided the income they needed to survive right up until the grandmother-in-law finally passed away.
Hold on. I mean, just think about the implications there. She wasn't cross-dressing for kicks or for adventure.
No, not at all.
It was because the whole social structure back then offered zero support for a single mom with an illegitimate kid. It was literally about survival.
Absolutely survival. And the irony, or perhaps the consequence, is that this forced disguise completely shaped Mary's life.
Yeah.
Her identity, her sense of what was possible.
So when the grandmother's money stopped,
By then, Mary was used to the role. Her mother tried to hire her out, age 13, as a footboy, like a page or servant, to some unnamed French lady.
but Mary wasn't having it.
Hated it, apparently. Johnson says she detested servitude. Having tasted the relative freedom that came with being perceived as male, she couldn't stand being ordered around like that.
So she took off.
Yeah.
Jumped ship, literally and metaphorically.
She did, deserted the footboy job, and this is where she actively starts choosing the male path. She signs on as a cabin boy on a British warship.
Wow. Into the military world.
Right. But she didn't stick with the Navy long, felt it was too much like the servitude she hated, so she deserts again and enlists in the army over in Flanders.
She seems to be searching for something. Action. Respect.
Action, definitely. She served in both infantry and cavalry units, moved between them, and apparently she gained quite a reputation for being bold, courageous in battle.
But you couldn't get promoted, right?
That-
Wouldn't get a commission even with bravery. Why was that?
Well, that boils down to the rigid class system of the time. Getting promoted to an officer, getting a commission.
Oh.
It wasn't primarily about merit, it was mostly about purchase.
You had to buy your rank.
Overwhelmingly, yes. You needed money, social connections. Mary had proven herself in battle, sure, but she had neither the wealth nor the social standing to buy her way up. She was stuck, hitting that 18th century glass ceiling, even while successfully disguised as a man.
That must have been incredibly frustrating.
You'd imagine so. And maybe that frustration led to her next brief detour, back towards a more conventional life.
She fell in love.
She did.
There you
With
go.
a fellow soldier, a Flemish guy who was apparently her tent mate.
So she had to reveal her secret. That's a huge risk.
Enormous risk. Johnson, of course, paints it as this grand romantic moment. The soldier is shocked, then delighted. They get married.
And their comrades helped them out.
Yeah, the story goes their fellow soldiers were so intrigued they chipped in money as wedding gifts. Enough for Mary and her husband to buy an inn near Breda Castle called the Three Horseshoes.
The Three Horseshoes. Sounds almost idyllic. Little break from the chaos.
It does. But, like a lot of small businesses, especially back then, it didn't last. Her husband died unexpectedly.
And the business failed.
The business failed, and just like that, Mary's conventional life path vanished. Widow, no business, no income. The freedom she'd briefly had was gone.
So she went back to the only identity that offered her a way forward. Besides, servitude or prostitution.
Exactly. Back into the male disguise. She enlisted again, this time on a Dutch merchant ship heading for the West Indies. And that, fatefully, was the ship that Calico Jack Rackham's crew would later capture.
Okay, now let's switch to Anne Bonny. Her backstory, according to Johnson, is totally different. Wealth, scandal, not necessity.
Complete contrast, yeah. Anne Cormac, born near Cork in Ireland. Illegitimate daughter again, but this time the father was William Cormac, a rich, successful lawyer. The mother was his servant, Mary Brennan.
So, big scandal potential for a man of his standing.
Huge. And he used a similar trick to Mary Read's mother, but for social cover, not money. He initially raised Anne as a boy.
Pretending she was. An apprentice clerk.
An apprentice clerk, yeah. Trying to hide the affair and the child from his wife and from society.
Johnson must have loved this stuff, the drama.
Oh, he plays it up big time. There's this almost comical soap opera story about how the wife found out. Supposedly, she framed the maid, Mary Brennan, by planting stolen silver spoons in her bed.
Seriously, silver spoons.
That's the story Johnson tells. It's pure melodrama, designed to hook the reader. High stakes, moral failings. Classic Johnson.
Okay, so the scandal eventually breaks. What happens then?
The whole situation becomes untenable in Ireland. So Cormac, Mary Brennan, and young Anne, they emigrate. They head to the colonies, specifically Charleston, South Carolina.
And the father does well there?
Extremely well, reestablishes himself, becomes a successful merchant, even owns a plantation. So Anne, unlike Mary Read, grew up with the potential for a comfortable, wealthy life.
But things went sideways. Her mother died when she was young.
Around age 12, yeah. And after that, maybe without that maternal influence, or maybe inheriting some of her father's ruthlessness, Anne developed what Johnson calls a fierce and courageous temper.
And he provides examples, doesn't he? They're pretty violent ones.
Almost cartoonishly violent. The story about her stabbing a servant girl with a knife.
Oh, she...
And the other famous one, that she beat up a young man so badly, supposedly because he tried to assault her, that he was like half dead or needed long recovery.
Whether those are true or not, they paint a picture, don't they?
They absolutely function as her origin story for ruthlessness. They signal to the reader, this woman is not playing by the rules. She's dangerous. She won't be controlled.
And that rebellious streak really came out when it was time for her to marry, around 1718.
Definitely. She completely defied her father. Instead of marrying someone suitable, she married James Bonny, a poor sailor, maybe a small-time pirate himself. Basically, completely unacceptable to her wealthy father.
So he disowned her.
Cut her off completely.
And the rumor is she retaliated.
The rumor, again probably fueled by Johnson or local gossip he picked up, was that she burned down her father's plantation in revenge.
Wow. Okay. Fierce, vengeful, won't be controlled by dad. Got it. That fits the legend.
Perfectly. So Anne and James Bonny move. Where did they go? To the pirate capital, of course. New Providence, Nassau in the Bahamas.
But the marriage didn't last long there, did it? James Bonny.
Yeah.
He took a different path.
He did. Governor Woodes Rogers arrived in Nassau in 1718 with a royal pardon for any pirates who surrendered. James Bonny took the pardon.
Okay, fair enough, maybe.
But then he went further. He became an informant for Governor Rogers, started ratting out his former pirate buddies.
Ah, that wouldn't sit well with Anne.
Not at all. For someone like Anne, who seemed to crave independence and despise authority and rules, being married to an informant, a turncoat, that was probably the ultimate humiliation. She apparently despised him for it.
So while James is cozying up to the governor.
Anne's hanging out in the taverns, mingling with the very pirates her husband is spying on. And it's there, probably around 1719, she meets John Rackham.
Calico Jack. The flamboyant one.
The flamboyant one. A rising star in the pirate world. Apparently, there was an immediate connection. She leaves James Bonny, throws her lot in with Rackham, and joins his crew, ready for a life of open piracy.
Right, before we get to the capture, which is legendary in itself, let's just pause on the setup. Anne joins Rackham's crew. She's initially disguised, right, like Mary Read would be later.
Yes. Johnson says she wore men's clothes, hid her distinctive red hair. She wasn't just, Rackham's girlfriend hanging around. She was an active crew member.
Doing what specifically?
She served as a powder monkey.
Okay, what does that involve? Sounds messy.
It was. And dangerous. It meant running gunpowder and ammunition shot up to the gunners during the heat of battle. A vital job right in the middle of the chaos. It shows she was physically involved, part of the actual fighting operation.
Okay. But then there was a break. She got pregnant.
She did, with Rackham's child. The story goes she went to Cuba to have the baby.
And what happened to the child?
The historical accounts, mostly stemming from Johnson again, suggest the baby was left behind in Cuba. Abandoned, essentially.
And Anne went straight back to the pirate ship.
Almost immediately, which tells you a lot about her priorities, doesn't it? The pirate life, that independence came first, even over motherhood.
It's a stark choice.
It is. And it's around this time after she returns that Rackham's crew captures that Dutch merchant ship Mary Read was serving on.
So this is when they meet.
This is when they meet. But remember, Mary is still deep in her male disguise. She'd gone back to it after her husband died. So on Rackham's ship, she's known as Mark Read, a young sailor.
And Anne initially thinks she's a man.
Right. And this is where Johnson really pours on the drama, fueling all that later speculation about their relationship.
What does he claim happened?
He spins this yarn about Anne being attracted to the handsome young Mark, making advances. Rackham gets incredibly jealous, thinking Anne is cheating on him with this new crewman. Big drama. Until, supposedly, Anne takes Rackham aside and reveals the secret. Mark is actually Mary, a woman.
Ah, the big reveal. Very theatrical.
Totally theatrical. Johnson says Rackham agrees to keep Mary's secret, probably realizing the novelty value or just wanting to keep Anne happy. And suddenly, boom, he's got two notorious female pirates on his small ship. It's pure gold for a storyteller like Johnson. Whether any of that jealousy plot actually happened, highly debatable. Comes from him, not the court.
Okay, so setting aside the romance angle for a second, what about the actual piracy they did together? What's historically solid?
The timeline, that's pretty solid based on official records. The key event is the theft of the sloop William. It belonged to a man named John Ham in Nassau. Rackham, Bonny and Read, along with the rest of the crew, stole it on August 22, 1720.
August 22nd. Okay.
And their entire known active pirating career from that date until they were captured lasted approximately 61 days.
61 days. That's it.
That's it, just over 2 months.
Wow. Okay, that is genuinely shocking. 61 days. Yet Anne Bonny and Mary Read are arguably two of the most famous pirates ever. How does a 2-month career generate that level of fame? It eclipses guys who were out there for years.
It boils down to the novelty factor. Johnson hit the jackpot with the story angle. 2 women, fighting like men, dressed as men, cursing, swearing, braver than the men they sailed with.
That story was just irresistible.
Completely. It had everything. Sex, violence, gender-bending, rebellion. The actual scale of their piracy, tiny. They were small time. They targeted small coastal vessels in the West Indies.
What kind of cargo were they taking? Not treasure chests full of gold, presumably.
Oh, definitely not. We're talking really unglamorous stuff. Tobacco, barrels of peppers, fishing tackle, maybe some rum. The sloop William itself was small, maybe 12, 18 tons. A handful of small cannons. They weren't exactly striking fear into the Spanish Main. They were minor players who became major legends purely because they were women.
But the authorities noticed them pretty quickly, didn't they?
Yeah.
Even if they were small time.
They did. Governor Woodes Rogers in Nassau issued a proclamation specifically naming Rackham, Bonny and Read as pirates and enemies of the crown. That was dated September 5, 1720.
So just 2 weeks after they stole the sloop, they were officially wanted criminals.
Exactly. And it's from the subsequent trial that we get our best, least biased information about their actions, specifically the testimony of one of their victims.
Dorothy Thomas, right. Her account is pretty chilling.
It is, and crucial because it's sworn testimony, not Johnson's imagination. She described Bonny and Read very clearly during the attack on her vessel.
What did she say they looked like? How did they act?
She said they wore men's jackets, long trousers, and had handkerchiefs tied around their heads. Standard pirate gear, really. But she emphasized their aggression. Each one carried a machete and a pistol.
And they were actively involved in the violence.
Very actively. Thomas testified that Bonny and Read were constantly cursing and swearing at the men in their own crew, urging them to murder Thomas so she couldn't testify against them later.
Wow, that's cold-blooded.
It paints a picture of them as being among the most ruthless members of the crew. And Thomas also provided the detail that confirmed their gender for her and likely for the court. She said she knew they were women by the largeness of their breasts.
Okay, so maybe the disguise wasn't always perfect, or maybe they didn't bother with tight binding when they weren't in the heat of battle.
Could be either. Or maybe they just wore looser shirts. But the key point is, Thomas's testimony confirms they were armed, aggressive, direct participants in the violence, not just passengers or lovers along for the ride.
Which makes the story of their final capture even more potent, I suppose. The contrast.
Exactly. Their brief career ended very suddenly. October 2010, 1720, just off Negril Point, Jamaica. They were anchored, maybe celebrating a recent capture.
And they were surprised.
Completely surprised by a sloop called the Tiger. It was commanded by Captain Jonathan Barnett, a privateer who'd been hired by the governor of Jamaica specifically to hunt Rackham down.
So the government was outsourcing pirate hunting.
Pretty common tactic back then. Cheaper than using the Royal Navy sometimes.
And the story of the capture itself, it doesn't paint Rackham and the men in a very good light, does it?
Not at all. The sources, heavily influenced by Johnson, of course, claim Rackham and most of the male crew were drunk, completely incapacitated.
So when Burnett's men boarded,
they basically offered no resistance, hid below decks, supposedly, and surrendered almost immediately, begging for quarter.
but not the women.
Johnson makes a huge deal of this. He claims Bonny, Read, and maybe one other unnamed man were the only ones on deck who actually fought back, firing pistols, wielding cutlasses, cursing the cowards hiding below.
Again, the women are the brave ones, the men are weaklings. Great narrative contrast.
Perfect narrative contrast. While the official trial record just confirms the capture, this image drunk, cowardly men versus two ferocious fighting women is the one that stuck. It cemented their legend.
So the whole crew gets taken back to Spanish Town, Jamaica for trial.
Right, and things moved fast. Rackham and the male pirates were tried, found guilty, and hanged within a couple of days, November 16th to 18th, 1720.
And Rackham's end was particularly gruesome, displayed publicly.
Yeah, his body was gibbeted, hung up in a metal cage at a small islet near Court Royal that became known as Dead Man's Cay. A very public warning to other pirates.
Grim. And this is when Anne Bonny supposedly delivered her most famous line.
That's the story. Johnson claims she was allowed to visit Rackham in his cell just before his execution, but instead of tears or comfort, she just laid into him.
What did she say? The famous quote.
Had you fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog.
Oof. Brutal. Zero sympathy. All about strength and, well, fighting spirit.
Exactly. It perfectly encapsulates that ruthless, independent image Johnson cultivated for her.
So Rackham and the men are dead. Now it's Bonny and Read's turn to face trial.
November 28th, 1720. Same place, Spanish Town. The outcome was never really in doubt. They were found guilty of piracy, sentenced to hang.
But they didn't hang. They had one last card to play.
The famous pleading their bellies. Both women, when asked if they had anything to say why sentence shouldn't be carried out, claimed they were pregnant.
And that was a valid legal defense, at least temporarily.
It was. Under English common law at the time, an unborn child was considered innocent. Executing a pregnant woman would kill the innocent child, too. So if the court confirmed the pregnancy, usually via an examination by a panel of matrons, the execution would be stayed, postponed until after the baby was born and often weaned.
So it bought them time. But this is where their stories split and things get murky. What happened to Mary Read?
Mary Read. Well, she never left prison. The parish records in St. Catherine, Jamaica, show a burial record for a Mary Read dated April 28, 1721.
So she died in prison about 5 months after the trial. What did she die of?
Johnson suggests it was a fever, which was common in prisons back then, but the timing is interesting. April 1721 would have been fairly close to when she might have expected to give birth if she was indeed pregnant in November 1720.
So did she die from complications of childbirth, or did she die while still pregnant? Is there any record of the baby?
And that's the mystery. There is absolutely no record of a baby being born or buried. Nothing. So historians are left wondering, was she genuinely pregnant? Did she die before giving birth or from childbirth? Or was the pregnancy claim maybe a desperate gamble that bought her time, but then illness took her anyway? We just don't know. The record is silent on the child.
Okay, so Mary Read dies in prison, cause unknown. What about Anne Bonny? She also pleaded her belly. What happened to her?
Anne Bonny just vanishes, completely disappears from the historical record after that stay of execution. There's no record of her being executed, no record of her dying in prison like Mary.
Nothing. She just gone.
Gone. Now there is one tantalizing clue. Much later, in the same St. Catherine Parish records where Mary Read is buried, there's a burial entry for an Anne Bonny dated December 29th, 1733.
13 years later. Could that be her?
It could be. It suggests maybe she was released. Perhaps her father used his wealth and influence to quietly secure her freedom after the child was born. Maybe she lived out a quiet life in Jamaica for over a decade.
But it's not confirmed.
Yeah.
Just a name in a register.
Exactly. It's not definitive proof. So her ultimate fate remains a total mystery. Did she escape? Did she rejoin her father? Did she die young under a different name? We have no idea. And honestly, that mystery is a huge part of why her legend is so powerful and enduring. She got away, somehow.
It's so easy to get caught up in Bonny and Read, isn't it? Because their stories so dramatic, so personal.
Absolutely. Johnson made sure of that.
But what our sources really highlight is that powerful women at sea weren't just an 18th century Caribbean thing.
Yeah.
And some achieved, well, a level of success and power that makes Bonny and Read's 61-day stint look, frankly, insignificant.
Oh, completely. If you want to talk about scale, about real lasting power and success in piracy, you have to look east to Chiang Sao, also known as Chingsha.
Operating off the South China coast, early 19th century.
That's her. And many historians consider her quite simply the most successful pirate in history, period. Male or female.
That's a huge claim.
Yeah.
What's her story? How did she reach that point? Her beginnings weren't exactly grand, were they?
Not at all. She started out as a prostitute in Canton, but she married a very powerful pirate commander, Cheng I, in 1801. She was clearly more than just a wife. She was involved in the operational side of things.
When she took over when he died.
He died suddenly in 1807, maybe in a typhoon. And she didn't just inherit his position, she actively seized power, which must have required incredible political skill dealing with rival captains and factions within the fleet.
How did she consolidate her control?
Crucially, she formed an alliance both personal and professional with her late husband's adopted son and chief lieutenant, a man named Chang Pao. He became her second-in-command, her lover, and eventually her husband. That partnership secured the loyalty of the fleet's core leadership.
And this fleet, we need to grasp the sheer size of it. The numbers are just mind-boggling.
They really are. At its absolute peak, Chiang Kai-shek's confederation commanded something like, well, estimates vary, but often cited figures are over 800 ships. Large ocean-going junks, not little sloops.
800 ships?
And the manpower. Possibly 70,000 pirates under her command? 70,000.
That's not a pirate crew. That's a navy. That's bigger than some national navies of the time.
It was a navy. A massive independent maritime power. Think about the logistics. Feeding, arming, paying, controlling 70,000 people across hundreds of vessels. It's staggering organizational complexity.
How did she manage it? Discipline must have been key.
Absolutely central. She didn't just command, she governed. She implemented an incredibly strict, detailed code of conduct that applied to everyone in the fleet.
What kinds of rules are we talking about?
Rules about the division of plunder, naturally. Strict rules about conduct ashore, respecting civilian populations that cooperated, for instance. She organized the entire force into 6 fleets, each with its own colored flag, red, black, white, etc. Chang Pao commanded the largest, the Red Flag Fleet.
But the rules about personal conduct were particularly harsh, weren't they? Especially regarding treatment of prisoners.
Extremely harsh and very telling about her authority. For example, desertion wasn't tolerated. If you were caught trying to leave without permission, you might get your ears lopped off as a warning. Or just beheaded on the spot.
Okay, standard pirate discipline? Maybe. But the rules about women?
Those were remarkable. Rape of female captives was absolutely forbidden. The penalty, instant beheading.
Wow.
And even consensual sex with a captive woman had strict rules. If a pirate wanted to take a captive woman as his wife, he had to be formally married to her and remain faithful. If he was caught cheating later, he was executed too.
That's extraordinary. Controlling the personal lives of 70,000 men to that degree and offering that level of protection to female captives, it speaks volumes about her power and maybe her own experiences.
It enforced discipline, prevented infighting, and maintained her absolute authority. It made her fleet a cohesive, disciplined force, not just a rabble.
And eventually she became too powerful for even the Chinese Empire to handle on its own.
Exactly. Her fleets dominated the South China Sea. They defeated Qing dynasty fleets repeatedly. It got so bad that the Chinese government took the extraordinary step of asking for foreign help. They basically hired the British and Portuguese navies to try and suppress her.
So she's facing the Chinese Navy, the British Navy, and the Portuguese Navy. How did it end? Was she finally defeated in some epic battle?
That's the most amazing part. No, she wasn't defeated by force. She out-negotiated everyone.
She negotiated her surrender.
She negotiated an amnesty. In 1810, probably realizing that the constant warfare was becoming unsustainable, but knowing she held immense leverage, she personally went to the Governor General in Canton.
Walked right in.
Essentially, yes. She bypassed intermediaries and negotiated directly, and she struck an incredible deal.
What were the terms?
A full pardon from the emperor for herself and almost all her followers. Crucially, she was allowed to keep all the wealth she had accumulated through piracy. All of it.
She kept the loot.
She kept the loot. She surrendered her fleet, yes, but walked away a free, incredibly wealthy woman. She even got to keep a small personal fleet for herself and Chang Pao for use in the salt trade.
Unbelievable. So she just retired.
Peacefully retired. She married Chang Pao legally, and she used her wealth to open and run a gambling house. Some sources say a brothel, but usually a gambling establishment in Canton, and she ran it successfully until she died of old age in 1844.
That has to be the most successful retirement plan in pirate history.
Unmatched. No other major pirate leader, male or female, achieved anything close to that. Pardon. Wealth intact. Peaceful death. It confirmed she wasn't just a pirate, she was a brilliant strategist, administrator, and politician.
Okay, let's shift gears completely. Different time, different place, different motivations. Let's go back to the 16th century. Ireland, Grace O'Malley.
Granuaile.
Ah, Granuaile, yes. A figure rooted in Gaelic Irish plan politics and resistance against English expansion rather than just plunder for wealth, though she did plenty of that too.
She was an Irish chieftain
Right.
from Connacht County, Mayo. Yes, head of the O'Malley clan, and she commanded her own fleet, maybe 20 ships or so, not Chengi Sow scale, but formidable in the context of 16th century Ireland. She inherited a family tradition of seafaring, trading, and yes, raiding English shipping along the coast.
And her nickname, Granue. It means the bald one. Why?
Yeah, that's the traditional meaning. The story often told is that she cut her hair short as a young woman, maybe to defy her father who said women couldn't sail, or simply because long hair was impractical for life on a ship. It marked her out as different, unconventional.
And the stories about her are legendary, almost mythical sometimes, like fighting off pirates right after giving birth.
That's one of the most famous ones. Supposedly, Turkish pirates attacked her ship just a day after she'd given birth below decks. Hearing the commotion, she leaps up, grabs two blunderbusses, rallies her men, and helps drive the attackers off. True or not, it perfectly captures the image of her toughness, her leadership, her absolute refusal to be sidelined even by childbirth.
But her life wasn't all glorious victories. She faced setbacks, imprisonment.
Oh, yes. The English authorities, particularly Sir Richard Bingham, the governor of Connacht, saw her as a major thorn in their side. She was captured during a raid and imprisoned for about 18 months. Her lands were confiscated, her ships impounded.
Which leads to her most famous moment, the meeting with Queen Elizabeth I.
An absolutely remarkable event. In 1593, Grace O'Malley is around 63 years old. She's lost much of her power base. Her sons and half-brother are imprisoned by the English, so she takes an extraordinary gamble. She sails to London.
To petition the Queen directly.
Yeah.
A Gaelic chieftain going to the heart of English power.
Directly. And she manages to secure an audience at Greenwich Palace. You have these two incredibly powerful, aging women leaders meeting face to face. Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, ruler of England. Grace, the Sea Queen of Connacht.
What was the dynamic like? The sources mention details like Grace refusing to bow.
That's part of the legend. She supposedly refused to bow because she didn't recognize Elizabeth as Queen of Ireland, only England. They apparently conversed in Latin, as Grace didn't speak English well and Elizabeth didn't speak Gaelic. Grace presented herself, reportedly, as this tired, broken old woman just wanting her family back and her livelihood restored, begging for mercy.
Playing role.
Almost certainly. She was appealing to Elizabeth's sense of magnanimity, maybe even vanity. She asked for her fleet back, the release of her son. Basically, permission to continue her maritime trade, which always blurred the line with piracy.
And Elizabeth granted it.
She did. Elizabeth seems to have been intrigued, perhaps respected Grace's audacity. She issued orders for the release of Grace's son and the return of her property, essentially giving her a conditional pardon and license to operate, provided she stopped attacking the English.
But did she stop?
Not entirely. The record suggests she and her sons were involved in raiding and skirmishes pretty much until her death around 1603. The meeting with Elizabeth wasn't about retiring. It was a brilliant political move to regain her power and continue her way of life. A strategic negotiation.
Okay, one more figure before we circle back to Bonny and Read's legacy. Let's jump forward again, late 18th century. America this time. Rachel Wall.
Yes, Rachel Wall. Significant because she's one of the very few documented female pirates from colonial or early America. Most piracy was dominated by men then, too.
She was from Pennsylvania originally. Ran away from home.
Yeah, ran away, ended up in Boston, married a fisherman named George Wall. They struggled financially, and that's when they turned to piracy, but with a really insidious method.
Not straightforward attacks.
No, pure deception. They'd take their small fishing boat or schooner out, maybe off the coast of New Hampshire or Massachusetts. They'd make it look like it had been damaged in a storm, torn sails, maybe taking on water.
Setting a trap.
Exactly. Then Rachel would stand on deck, playing the damsel in distress, waving, crying out, pleading for help from any passing ship. The siren song, as it's sometimes called.
Luring rescuers in.
Luring rescuers in. And when a Good Samaritan vessel came alongside to offer assistance, George Wall and their hidden crew would swarm aboard.
And it wasn't just robbery, was it?
No, it was brutal. They reportedly robbed everyone on board, then murdered the entire crew and sank the ship. No witnesses.
How many ships did they take this way?
It's hard to know for sure, maybe up to a dozen over a couple of years. It was a short, vicious career based entirely on treachery.
How did it end for them?
Ironically, the sea took George. A real storm hit their boat in 1782. George Wall was washed overboard and drowned. The boat was wrecked. Rachel survived.
But she didn't stop her criminal life.
No, she went back to Boston, worked as a servant, but continued petty theft on the side. She was eventually arrested in 1789, not for piracy, but for stealing a woman's bonnet and some buckles from her on the street.
Just for theft. But she was executed.
She was. And this is her historical significance. Rachel Wall was the last woman ever hanged in the state of Massachusetts, October 8, 1789. Her reputation as a pirate, even though the final charge was robbery, likely sealed her fate.
And she left a confession, didn't she? But with a notable omission.
Yes. While awaiting execution, she wrote or dictated a confession. She admitted to all sorts of sins, breaking the Sabbath, disobeying her parents, lying, stealing, basically confessed to being a terrible person. But she explicitly denied ever committing murder.
Even though her piracy method involved killing everyone.
Even then, she went to the gallows, insisting she was guilty of everything except taking a life. A final, perhaps self-serving distinction she wanted to make. So, when we circle back to Anne, Bonny, and Mary Read, their legacy, it really is a testament to the power of a good story. Or maybe the power of fiction.
Because their actual career was so short. Barely 2 months of documented activity.
Exactly. The fame is just wildly out of proportion to the facts of their criminal careers, and it all comes back to Charles Johnson.
His general history from 1724. He knew how to sell a story.
He absolutely did. He used what scholars call telltale fiction. Filling in the gaps, yes. But more than that, crafting personalities, motivations, dramatic scenes, creating iconic characters that people would remember and talk about. He wasn't just reporting, he was myth-making.
And one of the clearest examples of this, maybe, is the nickname of their captain, John Rackham, Calico Jack.
Ah, yes, Calico Jack. Sounds dashing, doesn't it? The flamboyant pirate captain.
But is it real? Our sources cast serious doubt on that nickname.
They do. The name Calico Jack appears, as far as we know, only in Johnson's book, specifically in the appendix section that details the trial and executions.
Not in any official documents.
Yeah.
Not the trial records themselves.
Nope. In all contemporary records, court documents, governor's proclamations, he's just John Rackham, or sometimes John Rackham. No Calico.
So where did Johnson get it from? Or did he just make it up?
Johnson claims Rackham got the nickname because he liked to wear jackets and trousers or drawers made of calico fabric.
Okay. Seems plausible, maybe.
Except for the cultural context. In the early 18th century, especially in the rough, masculine world of sailors and pirates, calico, a brightly printed cotton fabric, often imported from India, was generally associated with women's clothing. Or at least it had somewhat effeminate connotations.
Ah. So calling him Calico Jack wasn't necessarily a compliment.
Probably not. Many historians now suspect Johnson either invented the nickname entirely or perhaps exaggerated a minor detail. Why? Maybe to make Rackham sound more colorful, more memorable. Or perhaps to subtly feminize him, linking him visually to the two actual women pirates who made his crew famous. It adds to the overall sensational package.
It fits the narrative he was building.
Perfectly. John Rackham, who wore plain canvas, just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And this fictionalizing wasn't just in the text, right? It happened in the pictures, too. The images of Bonny and Read changed over time.
They really did. And those changes tell us a lot about how society viewed them, particularly through a male lens. The very first engravings, the ones published with Johnson's book in 1724, they're actually quite cautious.
How so?
They show Bonny and Read dressed in men's clothes, yes. Sailors' jackets, trousers, caps. But they look fairly androgynous, almost like generic male sailors, just maybe with slightly softer features or wearing bonnets instead of tricorn hats. The focus seems to be on the cross-dressing itself, the disguise. They aren't overtly sexualized.
But that changed later, as the stories became more popular.
Drastically changed, especially in later editions, like Dutch versions from 1725, and definitely by the 19th century when their legend was firmly established in popular culture. The illustrations become much more sensationalized.
What did they start showing?
You start seeing depictions where their female forms are much more emphasized, even while wearing men's clothes. Shirts are open, revealing their breasts. Trousers might be tighter or looser in ways that highlight curves. They look less like convincing male impersonators and more like women playing dress-up, but still dangerous.
So emphasizing their violence, but also their femininity simultaneously.
Exactly. They're still shown brandishing pistols and cutlasses, looking fierce, but the artists are making sure the viewer knows these are women. It reflects this kind of societal fascination mixed with discomfort. They couldn't just be accepted as effective pirates who happen to be women. Their gender, their otherness, had to be constantly highlighted, often in a sexualized way.
Which leads us directly to the modern fascination, doesn't it? The persistent debate about whether Bonny and Mary Read were lovers.
Mm-hmm. That's a really common interpretation today, fueled entirely by those dramatic, likely fictional scenes in Johnson's book.
The jealousy plot with Rackham, Anne being drawn to Mark, the shared secret.
All that stuff. It makes for a great story, especially for modern audiences interested in exploring queer history and challenging traditional narratives. It gives their defiance another layer.
But again, we have to ask, what does the actual historical record say? The trial transcripts.
About their personal relationship? Absolutely nothing. Zero. The court was interested in one thing. Did they commit piracy? Yes. Okay, guilty? Are they pregnant? Yes. Okay, stay of execution. Their private lives, their feelings for each other, completely irrelevant to the legal proceedings.
So the idea of a lesbian relationship is purely interpretation based on Johnson's possibly fictional account.
It's a modern reading layered onto Johnson's sensationalism. There's no primary source evidence from their time to confirm it one way or the other.
But maybe the specifics of their relationship aren't the most important thing. Maybe the focus should be on what they represented. You called them gender outlaws.
I think that's a really useful way to look at it. Regardless of their sexual orientation, which we simply can't know, they were undeniably gender outlaws. They operated completely outside the expected norms for women in their society.
They chose a male profession, male clothing, male behaviors, aggression, violence, independence.
Exactly. They fought for and achieved, however briefly, a level of freedom and autonomy that was virtually impossible for women through conventional means. They weren't just outlaws against the king, they were outlaws against the rules of gender itself.
And their method, using male disguise to access that world, wasn't unique to them, was it? It was a known, if dangerous, strategy.
Not unique at all. As we discussed with Mary Read, her initial cross-dressing was forced by her mother for financial survival, but many other women chose it deliberately for different reasons. Adventure, escaping poverty, patriotism, or just the desire for a life beyond domesticity.
Like Hannah Snell, her story is incredible.
Hannah Snell is amazing. Served 9 years in the British Army and Navy as James Gray. Fought in battles, was wounded.
And the risks she took to maintain her disguise were extreme.
Astounding. The sources say she was flogged, once received 12 lashes, and managed to hide her gender. Even more incredibly, she was shot in the groin.
Wow.
Yeah. And instead of going to the ship's surgeon, which would have exposed her immediately, she reportedly treated the wound herself. According to her biography, she probed the wound with her own fingers to extract the musket ball.
Oh my God, the pain, the risk of infection, just to avoid being discovered.
It shows the absolute desperation to hold on to the life she had chosen, the independence that male identity afforded her.
And there were others too, like William Brown.
Yes, William Brown, who was later discovered to be a black woman, reportedly served 11 years in the Royal Navy on a major warship, the HMS Queen Charlotte, served with distinction apparently until her gender was discovered and she was discharged.
So Bonny and Read were part of a wider, hidden phenomenon of women using disguise to break into male domains.
They were perhaps the most famous examples from the pirate world, but the practice itself was more widespread than we might think across military and maritime professions. It highlights just how restrictive society was for women, that taking such enormous risks seemed like a viable, even preferable option.
And despite that incredibly short career, Bonny and Read achieved a kind of immortality, didn't they? Their fame started almost instantly.
Almost immediately. Their trial was a sensation. Johnson's book cemented their legend, and they started appearing in popular culture very quickly. John Gay's opera Polly, which was a sequel to The Beggar's Opera, written around 1729, features a character named Jenny Diver who is clearly inspired by Bonny or Read.
Just a few years after their trial.
Yes. And that cultural presence has never really faded. It just keeps evolving.
We see them everywhere today, right? Video games?
Assassin's Creed IV, Black Flag gave them major roles.
TV shows.
Black Sails had Anne Bonny as a central character. Our Flag Means Death has interpretations. They're constantly being reimagined, reinterpreted for new generations.
And they even got a statue recently.
They did. In 2020, a statue called Inexorable was commissioned and placed on Burr Island in the UK. It depicts Bonny and Read back-to-back, armed and ready, a permanent physical monument to their enduring, if heavily mythologized, status as icons of female defiance. Outro.
You know, looking back over all this entire deep dive, it really makes you think about how historical legends are made, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The two most famous female pirates had maybe the shortest careers.
And arguably among the least impactful in terms of actual piratical success. Yet their fame eclipses almost everyone else, because Johnson wrote one hell of a story about them.
So what's the main takeaway for you, looking at all these different women? Bonny Read, Cheng Sao, O'Malley, Wall.
I think the key thing is this. Their enduring power, their fascination, it's not really about the treasure they took or the ships they sank. It's about the sheer extremity of what was required for women back then to grab any kind of independence, any kind of recognition outside the home.
They had to go to such lengths.
Unbelievable lengths, disguise, extreme violence, political maneuvering on a grand scale. Their stories are amazing tales of daring, yes, but they're also stark reminders of just how suffocatingly restrictive that male-dominated world was. And crucially, they remind us to always question the historical sources, especially the early ones that clearly prioritize a sensational story over the perhaps boring truth.
So reflecting on the details, what's the one fact or idea that really stands out now? Is it that tiny 61-day window for Bonny and Read's actual known piracy?
That's pretty striking.
Or the fact that Calico Jack might just be a made-up nickname to make Rackham sound more interesting, or maybe even a bit effeminate next to his female crewmates?
That's a good one, too. Challenges the image.
Or is it Cheng Sao, commanding 70,000 men and negotiating her way into a wealthy retirement running a casino?
For me, actually, while Cheng Sao's success is mind-blowing, it's the visceral reality of the desperation that drove women like Mary Read or Hannah Snell. We focused a lot on the leaders, the famous names, but we need to remember there were likely countless unnamed women who took similar risks, maybe not becoming captains, but just disguising themselves to work, to earn a living wage, to escape poverty, to find some small measure of freedom.
And that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Yeah.
It comes back to that story of Hannah Snell.
The gunshot wound.
Right. Think about that moment. She's shot in the groin, a potentially fatal, incredibly painful injury. And her overriding fear isn't death, it's discovery. What does it tell us about her world, about her options, that she chose to perform agonizing, dangerous self-surgery? Probing the wound with her own finger, rather than let a doctor find out she was a woman and have her entire life, her independence, instantly taken away.
The sheer number of women who went through that kind of risk, disguising themselves just to enlist, just to get a job at sea, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? About the absolute lack of opportunities, the societal dead ends they faced. When your choices are basically domestic servitude, maybe marriage if you're lucky, destitution or prostitution, well, suddenly the immense danger of pretending to be a man, even with the risk of flogging or death in battle, starts to look like a desperate but maybe rational gamble for a chance at something more. A yearning for freedom in a world determined to deny it to them.